John, a wealthy businessman, couldn't ignore the sight of a homeless mother and her two young children shivering near his property on a chilly evening. Compassionately, he invited them to stay in his warm, spacious garage. The mother, Sarah, accepted his offer with gratitude, her relief palpable yet tinged with anxiety. That night, unable to sleep, Robert wrestled with doubts about his decision, ultimately reassuring himself that a good deed would lead to positive outcomes. His heart sank when he discovered the unsettling reality the next day. But before we start our story, smash the like button, make sure to subscribe and hit the notifications bell so you won't miss any new stories. When John first showed the family the cozy setup he had arranged in the garage, he reassured them that they could stay as long as they needed. The family seemed genuinely grateful, and John was satisfied with his decision. As they settled in, John noticed some odd nocturnal movements around his property but dismissed them as the family getting comfortable in their new temporary home. He tried to ignore the uneasy feeling that gnawed at him and went back to sleep. The following morning, while sipping his coffee, John received a concerned call from his neighbor, Mrs. Evans. She mentioned strange activities around his property the previous night. John, still basking in the glow of his good deed, dismissed her concerns, attributing the activities to his new guests. Later that day, he took a stroll through the neighborhood, listening to neighbors' concerns about the new occupants without revealing his own growing suspicions. A slight tension hung in the air due to the new occupants. John noticed furtive glances and whispered conversations but remained focused on the good he believed he was doing. The day passed without incident, and he thought Mrs. Evans and others were overreacting. However, things were about to get more complicated. By evening, John's unease had grown, prompting him to resolve to check on the garage that night. He hoped to find everything normal, but his instincts suggested otherwise. As night fell, he tried to focus on work, but his mind kept returning to the garage. Late that night, John sneaked out to the garage. Peering through a crack in the door, he observed the family interacting warmly but in hushed tones. They seemed to be discussing something important, piquing his curiosity. Instead of confronting the family, John decided to monitor their actions. Over the next few days, he made a habit of midnight observations. He noticed small details that didn't add up and realized he needed more information before taking action. The family settled into a routine, but John couldn't ignore inconsistencies. They received unusual visitors at odd hours, raising his suspicions. Despite their friendly daytime demeanor, their nighttime activities were questionable. John increased his observations, hoping for a logical explanation. John's suspicions grew as he observed discreet vehicles arriving late at night. The family transformed from kind and warm during the day to a different entity at night. This behavior contrasted sharply with their daytime persona, making John question his decision to let them stay. As days passed, John noticed a steady influx of packages delivered to the garage. The frequency and volume seemed excessive for a family living there. His initial feelings of generosity began to wane as something didn't add up. John considered calling the authorities but decided to gather concrete proof first. He installed hidden cameras around his property to capture any suspicious activities. As he set up the cameras, he felt a mix of anxiety and determination to uncover the truth. Reviewing the footage, John's suspicions deepened. There were numerous deliveries at odd times, hurried exchanges, and whispered conversations. One evening, John's friend Cliff and a police officer, Steve, visited. They discussed the strange activities captured on the cameras. Steve advised caution, suggesting more information was needed before taking action. Cliff agreed, and they decided to wait before involving authorities. John continued reviewing the footage, noting patterns of regular nighttime deliveries and exchanges. The contrast between the family's daytime innocence and nighttime secrecy was glaring. Each new piece of footage pointed to a larger, troubling scheme, deepening John's suspicions and determination to find answers. While running errands, a local business owner mentioned a spike in missing goods. John noted the correlation between the family's activities and the rise in missing items, suspecting a deeper connection. Although he didn't jump to conclusions, the pattern whispered that something more was at play. John felt increasingly uneasy as he pieced together information about a mysterious family in his neighborhood. Convinced something sinister was happening, he vowed to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, the family's teenage son befriended a local kid, and John overheard their cryptic conversations hinting at a hidden agenda. His resolve to uncover the truth intensified. The family blended into the neighborhood by day, but their nocturnal activities raised John's suspicions. He noticed a black van frequently parked nearby and strangers visiting at night, suggesting something more than simple visits. Each night added to the puzzle, urging John to act. Determined to dig deeper, John visited the family's previous neighborhood and discreetly asked questions. He learned they were evicted under suspicious circumstances, which only fueled his anxiety. Local shopkeepers recalled unusual activities and late-night gatherings before the eviction, hinting at a murky past. Driven by doubts, John kept a closer eye on the family. One night, he saw the father accept a parcel from a shady individual, confirming his suspicions. He meticulously documented every odd interaction in a journal, with his friend Cliff cautioning him to be careful. Despite the risks, John's mission to uncover the truth was unwavering. The tension mounted as John reviewed camera footage, confirming the family was stashing contraband in the garage. His anxiety turned into determination, pushing him further into the investigation. One day he received a warning note to stop his observations, but it only validated his suspicions and fueled his resolve. John increased his property's security, aware of potential threats. He confided in Steve, a police officer, about his concerns. Steve agreed to keep an eye on things, and neighbors shared their own uneasy experiences, confirming something unusual was happening. As John compiled details from neighbors, a clearer picture of the family's activities emerged. Steve advised patience, suggesting they gather more information before taking action. Despite his instinct for immediate action, John focused on meticulous observation, hoping to gather the proof needed to unveil the truth. That night, John watched the family through hidden cameras, feeling anxious as the teenage son frantically searched the garage for cameras. The boy's suspicious actions suggested he suspected surveillance, making John's heart race with fear of being discovered. Despite this, John hoped his surveillance remained discreet, while worrying about potential fallout. The next morning, John was alarmed to find a cryptic note on his doorstep reading, "Back off now." This warning felt like a cat-and-mouse game, with John as the prey. Despite the danger, his determination to uncover the family's secrets grew stronger. That afternoon, Steve visited and John showed him the note. Steve advised calmness and they discussed the need for caution. Tension rose when an unexpected visitor questioned John's surveillance activities. Remembering Steve's advice, John remained outwardly calm, despite inner turmoil. John pondered the visitor's implications, realizing his actions might have alerted the family. Nevertheless, he decided to delve deeper into their past, uncovering previous addresses and piecing together their history. Each discovery fueled his suspicion that their innocence was a facade. Determined to learn more, John hired a private investigator, providing a detailed dossier on the family. The investigator promised to uncover any hidden skeletons, leaving John in a tense waiting game. The investigator's findings confirmed John's fears. The family had a history of petty crimes and suspicious activities, moving from one neighborhood to another. However, the full extent of their operations was unclear. As rumors spread, neighborhood tension escalated, with eyes on John's garage. Despite fear, John felt resolved, knowing the stakes were rising. John maintained a facade of normalcy while distancing himself from the family to avoid suspicion. He kept interactions polite but minimal, aware that any misstep could lead to confrontation. Despite his caution, the family accused him of spying, bringing tensions to a boiling point. When confronted, John deflected confidently, attributing rumors to neighborhood gossip. Though the family's suspicions lingered, John's deflection temporarily diffused the situation. After the confrontation, John ceased visible surveillance, transitioning to covert methods. His heart pounded each time the family passed a hidden camera, knowing they might catch him spying again. He needed to stay ahead, balancing his investigation with their growing awareness. John felt their eyes on him constantly, even during mundane activities. The pressure was immense. The private investigator's report detailed the family's dubious activities, confirming John's worst fears. Their operations were more sinister and complex than he imagined, involving sophisticated schemes across various states. John worried about his potential implication just by housing them, realizing his reputation and safety were at risk. The family's friendly facade was wearing thin. Determined to act, John leaked parts of the dossier to a trusted local journalist, aiming to protect himself and the community. The journalist, sensing a big story, vowed to investigate further. John hoped this would lead to the family's exposure and downfall. The local journalist published the story, putting the family under scrutiny. Neighbors began watching them closely, whispering about the revelations. Tensions soared as people demanded answers, and the family could no longer move anonymously. John felt relief and anxiety, knowing he had pushed them into the public eye but fearing their response. His continued investigation uncovered links between the family and dangerous figures, making the situation precarious. Their network included individuals with violent histories, haunting John and eroding his sense of security. Sleep became elusive as he worried about retaliation, spending restless nights protecting himself and the community. Cliff remained a steadfast ally, urging caution. He believed in John's mission but worried about the escalating danger. One evening, Steve informed John of an imminent police raid on the family's operations, advising him to keep a low profile to avoid getting caught in the crossfire. With this development, John knew the climax of his investigation was near and braced for impact. As the police raid approached, John meticulously reviewed his footage for concrete evidence. John felt the tension mounting as his relentless pursuit of a criminal family neared its climax. Recent tapes showed the family's frantic activities, with people moving quickly and engaging in hushed, panicked conversations. A new figure, seemingly the mastermind, appeared in several videos orchestrating operations with chilling efficiency. John's anxiety grew, Fearing potential retaliation as the stakes rose and the family seemed ready for conflict, he prepared for the impending storm. Unexpectedly, a former associate of the family reached out to John, offering critical insight. This ally provided key information about the family's operations, confirming John's suspicions and giving him leverage. This twist gave John a glimmer of hope amidst the rising tension, and armed with new intelligence, he felt more prepared to face whatever came next, knowing he wasn't entirely alone in this fight. On the morning of the raid, tension was thick. John's neighbors watched curiously as unmarked police vehicles quietly lined the street. Steve, a police officer, nodded to his team, confirming the details. John's heart pounded with anticipation, knowing everything was about to change. The officers moved into position, each step echoing the gravity of the situation as the neighborhood held its breath. Flashing lights illuminated John's property, and chaos erupted inside the garage as the family grabbed items in a frantic rush. "They're here," someone shouted, sending shockwaves through the group. John watched from a safe distance, caught between relief and anxiety. The police handled it with precision, surrounding the area and making entry, while the atmosphere was electric with tension. Inside the garage, chaos reigned as Steve and his team uncovered hidden compartments filled with illegal items. The facade crumbled, revealing a complex operation. John felt a mix of vindication and horror as Steve reassured him of protection and justice. The full extent of the family's activities began to emerge. As police secured the scene, neighbors emerged from their homes, murmuring in shock. The once quiet street was now a flurry of law enforcement activity. John stayed close to Steve, absorbing the unfolding events. The reality of what had taken place finally sank in, and it became clear that the family's presence had been a ticking time bomb. The neighborhood, once peaceful, now stood in stunned silence. Police cataloged a staggering array of contraband and illegal items from the garage. John felt relief mixed with guilt, as the family had implicated themselves but also tarnished his goodwill. "We've got enough evidence to put them away for a long time," Steve commented, trying to comfort him. Thoughts of potential retaliation loomed large, reminding John that the situation was far from over. The neighborhood buzzed with conflicting emotions. Relief was palpable, but betrayal lingered. Some residents felt grateful for John's decisive actions, while others resented the turmoil. John focused on cooperating with authorities, handing over all his collected evidence. The full scope of the family's deceit became clear, and John hoped the information would end their exploits once and for all. Steve conducted follow-up interviews, piecing together the family's extensive operations. The media swarmed the neighborhood, sensationalizing the story and portraying John as a local hero. Reporters eagerly sought interviews, praising John's efforts, but he was more concerned with ensuring the community's safety. He provided Steve with additional insights, determined to untangle the web of deceit. Each new detail clarified the magnitude of the threat they had neutralized. Despite the praise, John couldn't ignore the lingering risks. He reflected on the potential consequences of his actions, aware that the family's associates might seek revenge. "We need to stay vigilant," he told Steve one evening. While the community's gratitude was comforting, John remained cautious. The threat of retaliation kept him on edge, and he knew he had to balance between being a hero and a target in the crucial days ahead. Cliff tried to lift John's spirits, joking as they sat over coffee. "Well, at least you've got your garage back," he chuckled. John smiled. The discovery's implications deeply unsettled John. Each document in the hidden compartment was evidence meticulously prepared against him by the family. His garage, once a place of comfort, now felt tainted with deceit. John realized his goodwill had been exploited, turning his sanctuary into a hub of illegal activities. His trust and generosity were manipulated, leaving him vulnerable. John grappled with the betrayal, which forced him to reconsider his actions. The community, too, was shaken, struggling between gratitude for John's initial kindness and mistrust due to the revelations. He understood that his act of generosity had unforeseen consequences, affecting not just him but everyone around him. John's journey highlighted the unexpected outcomes of well-intentioned actions. Known for his generosity, the community had always admired him. Allowing the homeless family to stay in his garage seemed like a simple act of kindness. The discovery shattered his belief in his own goodness and left him questioning the trust he once held dear. Finding the hidden compartment in his garage shattered John's sense of goodwill. What seemed like a simple act of kindness turned into a nightmare. The next day's discoveries left him speechless and heartbroken. He unknowingly risked his reputation by helping the family. As he processed the betrayal, he realized his actions, though well-intentioned, had dire consequences he could never have imagined. John stood in his garage, staring at the incriminating evidence. The family's clandestine operation implicated them and put John's reputation at risk. Every document confirmed their involvement in illegal and unethical activities. The family's betrayal left him questioning how his kindness had spiraled into such a complex web of deceit and danger. As John tried to move forward, he couldn't shake the mistrust now overshadowing his life. The once tight-knit community began to look at each other with suspicion. His interactions with neighbors became strained, filled with unspoken questions and doubts. John realized rebuilding trust would be a long, difficult journey. The sense of unity that once prevailed was replaced with a lingering shadow of doubt. John vowed never to let his guard down so easily again. The lessons from this experience were etched into his heart forever. He understood that while kindness is essential, it must be balanced with caution. His character and worldview were irreversibly changed. The man he was before had been transformed by betrayal and redemption, forever altering his perspective on trust and generosity. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another unbelievable tale like this one.